The Traveller's League Book 1 The Timepiece, written by Nick Goss. Marooned. Hoops opened his eyes to find himself sitting in yellow sand, staring at an ocean. He jumped up in a panic as he looked around. Where was his room? His apartment? Where was he, and how will he get home? He knew he was in big trouble. The city he lived in was nowhere near an ocean. It was hundreds of miles away, in fact. His mother would freak out when she came home. Maybe this is just a dream. He tried to make sense of what just happened. That whole swirl of magic dust thing when he rubbed the watch was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to him, and he was both scared and excited. The Traveller's Code came to mind, and the first two lines made more sense now. It's not an adventure till something goes wrong. You can only be brave when you're scared. He was scared, that was for sure, and that alone seemed to confirm he was on an adventure. Looking up, he saw the sky was light purple, but the sun was directly overhead. Purple sky at noon? Weird. Then his eyes opened wider than ever, as he saw not one, but two crescent moons side by side, just about to set over the ocean's horizon. Not only was he far away from the apartment and city, he was in an entirely new world. I'm in big trouble. He reached down and picked the timepiece up and brushed off the yellow sand. He opened it to make sure it wasn't broken. It was still set to 1 o'clock, but when he held it up to his ear, it wasn't clicking. He'd have to wind it up again. But after what just happened, travelling to a new world and all, he wasn't quite ready to do that. This watch did something besides keeping time. In fact, it didn't really keep time that well at all. Somehow, it helped him travel to this strange place. This was the adventure he'd always dreamed of. Discovering a new world would make him the most legendary explorer in history, and he was only 10 years old. He thought of his friends from school and how they were all bragging about what their families would be doing that summer. Disney World, Hawaii, amusement parks and summer camps. Boring! This would be the best summer ever, and he decided right then and there to begin exploring this strange place. He turned his back to the water and looked at a jungle paradise in front of him. It was like a thick wall of trees and vines that went endlessly in both directions. He heard the loud noises of animals he didn't recognize and saw things moving through the leaves and limbs above. The butterflies in his stomach told him he was a little scared, but he knew his adventure was somewhere in that jungle, or maybe it was the jungle itself. It was time to find out, so he began walking. Everything changed once he was in the jungle. The trees above were so thick, there was less sunlight and they blocked the cool wind from the beach. And since there was no wind, he could smell everything. And it was stinky. But dark, hot and stinky wouldn't keep him from his adventure, so he went deeper into the jungle. He quickly found a path that he could follow. It was a trail that all the jungle creatures had worn down with use. He figured it must lead somewhere interesting, so he followed it for a long time. Maybe a mile, maybe 2 miles, he wasn't sure, and he didn't care. Eventually, the trail came to an end at the foot of an amazing waterfall. Bright blue water spilled down from the hundreds of feet above into a big pool that narrowed into a river on its other end. Hoops loved how the water would gush over the edge of the waterfall, then break apart into a wall of droplets, then transition to a curtain of mist at the bottom. Where are all the animals? He could hear them when he first went into the jungle. He could surely smell them. He even used their path to get to the waterfall. Just then, as he scanned the opposite bank of the pool, he froze. On the other side of the pool, directly across from him, was an enormous creature. It was as big as an elephant, at least twice as tall as a grown man. It had leathery orange skin and had an eerie glow, making the jungle around it look darker. Each of its feet had 3 black claws, and it had thick, dark brown hair on its shoulders and running down the ridge of its back. Its neck was long like a horse, but its head made Hoop freeze with fear. It had jaws like a crocodile, with hair going from the top of its chin down its throat to its chest. It had 2 black horns shooting out the sides of its head that curved forward towards its snout, and at the tip of its snout was a 3rd horn like a rhino. It had wide, thick shoulders and chest that was smaller at its hips. Whatever it was ugly, dangerous and ill-tempered. The creature snorted and gurgled as it licked up the water with its forked tongue. Its every move and sound seemed like a warning to all the other jungle creatures. Even as it would drink, it would snort and growl. Little birds would land on its back while it wasn't moving, so it would snort and growl. It didn't have a tail to swat the big flies away, so when they'd land on its back and bite, it would snort and growl. Suddenly, the creature stretched its neck straight out, squeezed its eyes shut and shivered. A huge fart ripped out of its backside. The force of the fart shook the bushes and leaves behind it. Tiny creatures scurried out of the bushes in a panic, and birds abandoned their hidden nests. The leaves turned orange and withered instantly. The beast snorted and growled. "That was the most toxic explosion of butt gas I've ever seen. The guys will never believe this." He decided to name this new species the Ridgeback Toxigator, but he didn't have a camera or a journal with him to make any notes. "I have to bring a camera with me next time, and what kind of explorer doesn't carry a journal?" Another loud snort from the Toxigator convinced Hoops it would be best to just leave the beast alone and head back to the beach. He backed away from the pool's edge, very, very, very slowly, as silent as a ninja. Hoops stepped on a stick. "Hoops!" He stopped and remained perfectly still as his heart raced. "Please don't see me! Please don't see me!" But the Toxigator had excellent hearing and turned his head towards the sound across the pool. Its eyes were solid black, like 2 inky orbs with no pupils, and when they fell on Hoops, they filled with rage. "Oh no, it sees me!" The Toxigator erupted in a blood-curdling, bone-chilling roar. It stomped its feet on the ground and its whole body shivered with anger. It kicked the dirt out from behind its black-clawed legs and jumped into the pool towards Hoops. A strange, loud, airy voice hissed through the trees all around him. "You're too late, boy. It's mine. Give it to me." That was enough adventure for one day. Hoops turned and ran. His legs carried him faster than he'd ever gone in his life. He headed back the way he'd come along the path. As his heart pumped loudly in his ears, he could hear the Toxigator in the jungle behind him. He could hear the snort, 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 snort with every gallop. He could hear the monster's feet thud, 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 and the sounds grew louder as the creature got closer. And that loud, airy voice was terrifying. What was that? It came from everywhere all around him, and yet it came from the beast as well. "Give it to me, boy! It's mine! You can't escape!" Hoops kept going as fast as he could. He was in big trouble, and all he could think about as he ran was his mum, sitting at home worrying about him. Would he ever see her again? Would he die here? "No, I've got to get back home, but how?" The solution didn't come just then, as it was hard to focus on a plan when a Ridgeback Toxigator charged at you in the middle of the jungle. He was out of breath, but his legs kept moving him down the path. He would rather die from running out of breath than in the jaws of that stinky beast. Then he noticed the Toxigator's thuds and snorts were getting softer and slower. Hoops kept going anyway. The beast must be getting tired and slowing down. He glanced back to make sure, and yep, he was right. The beast had slowed down to a walk. It was still walking after him, but it was getting tired. When Hoops looked back, it bellowed out another loud, irritated roar. It still wanted him, but couldn't catch him. Hoops didn't stop running, nor did he slow down even a little bit. He thought about what would happen if the Toxicator had gotten a hold of him. Finally, he broke out of the jungle and onto the beach. The 2 crescent moons still hung over the horizon, and he could see his footsteps from where he'd first started walking. He collapsed into the soft, cool sand and caught his breath. He was alive. Catching his breath, he thought about the beast and the waterfall, the jungle path and the watering pool. A new world and a new species discovered by me, the youngest and most daring explorer in history, Worthington D. Hooper. If only I'd brought a camera and a journal. What kind of adventurer doesn't take a camera and a journal? Another line from the Traveller's Code made sense. Adventures are wasted on those who don't learn. He thought about returning to this world to recapture his discoveries. Perhaps next time he would take a different path into the jungle and maybe find a tree to climb up and observe from. Roar! The beast was still in the jungle looking for him, and it was closer. Hoop stopped thinking about how great an explorer he was and focused on how to get home. Home? He whispered to himself. As he did, the final words of the Traveller's Code floated through his brain. At 6:30, you'll always come home. 6:30? Hoop shouted at himself. Excitedly, he pulled out the timepiece, popped it open again and set the hands to 6:30. This time the watch didn't reset itself. He wound it up, snapped it closed and rubbed. The glowing sparks appeared and they circled around him just as before. As the swirling electric particles surrounded him, the Toxicator burst out of the jungle towards him. In a panic, he rubbed faster and faster. He desperately rubbed as the creature ploughed through the sand, now only yards away. His heart pounded, and his arms grew stiff from fear. The tornado of sparks made it hard to see the hulking beast, now only a few feet from him. Please hurry! The beast lunged as it opened its mouth and wrapped its jaws around Hoop's. Whoosh! Everything went black.